Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Skeleton Crew episodes 4 and 5. Can't say I remember no Attin, and you have a lot to learn about pirates. So these are two episodes that I think were really good in combination. I ended up seeing one like a week late, I didn't see them like back to back. I was like a week behind even seeing episode 4, which was a good episode. And then I just caught up on episode 5 yesterday. By the time you guys see this, it might be 2 days ago. It depends if I edit this tonight. But it's currently the 27th. I saw it on the 26th. But like both episodes, but I will go in order. Episode 4, I thought was really fun. I was like, okay, this is the era where we get into what I thought was going to be kind of like how the series is going to go moving forward. I feel a little differently now with the way episode 5 has ended, but we'll end up seeing what happens. But I was like, okay, this is where they get to basically like the circle of secret planets. And it's like, oh, this place is like our planet, but absolutely destroyed. This looks like our houses. This building is the school, just like our building. The place that they call like the Fallen Citadel or whatever they ended up calling it, where they found the coordinates to all the other planets, but Attin, of course, was, destroyed. That place looked exactly like what they had on their home planet, which was also like the main location, which makes perfect sense. I would assume on all of the planets is exactly the same as like the central tower that says like this is how you gain access to the coordinates for all of the old Republic planets that hide all the treasure. Now, based on what we got in specifically in episode 5, it makes more sense now why Attin was destroyed, because I was like, okay, well, there's a reason Attin was destroyed, and it was like, okay, all of the planets were wiped out in general except for Attin, but it seemed like it obviously followed like kind of a certain order. I would assume that the planets were destroyed in general, and for whatever reason Attin was the only one that didn't get destroyed, and that's kind of what led like Smee and his captain to end up on that planet. And that's what it was like, hey, destroy these coordinates, and then that's where we're gonna go. And then of course, we know what happened there. They crash landed. And then that was another thing that happened where it was like, all right, this happened over 100 years ago, at least over 100 years ago, because of course the ship has been in the ground so far that it was, or for so long I should say, that it was literally covered by the actual terrain of the planet. It was only discovered because it happened to be inside of what was created as like a divot, which was mostly created because the ship existed in the first place. That's what made that little dip in the land. So I thought that was really interesting when we actually got to the end of episode 4, and it was like, oh, this is like over, and obviously it seemed like it would be a long time anyway, because of course there were bones, in the ship and everything. But then it's like, all right, this is a legend that's been going on for over a century, at least over a century. And then there's also elements of being like, okay, this stuff is so far back that we're talking High Republic era. Like I think honestly, not to bring it up, but I think this would take place, at least what happened on the ship kind of took place during the era of the Acolyte, just to give a frame of reference, the High Republic era. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, this is like over 100 years ago. Obviously it's before, obviously we're not even in the sequel era now, but it was before the originals. It's even before the prequels. We're back in High Republic stuff where they knew that these planets were very important. I would assume, based on, once again, episode 5, Attin was the last planet to actually have like the Republic mint, so that they could continue to make the Republic credits. And I find that very interesting. It was like, you could just make money. And it was so interesting that was the answer by the end of episode 5, where I was like, oh, that's why it's a treasure planet. It's where they literally make the money for the Republic. They do it here. It's like the processing plant for money, money across the galaxy. Never would have thought that would be the answer, because I'm like, what could this planet possibly have? And it's like, oh, a special spot where they make money. And that's hidden away, when it's a galaxy of pirates that can travel here and there and like form a giant crew and then do whatever they want. That's really interesting, because I wouldn't have thought that would be the case. I'm like, there's got to be some special thing. Obviously they have Republic credits, but I wouldn't have expected it to have been, this is where they create the money. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a treasure planet. That makes a ton of sense. I would assume every planet did have that, but we haven't seen the other planets outside of one that was like completely wiped out. So they may have had one and then it was destroyed at one point, during the era when all the planets were kind of being wiped out. And maybe Attin was the only one that had it. It's possible. I don't know if this will end up being the case, but it is possible that Smee was, and his captain were the ones that kind of wiped out these planets. I mean, it seemed like it would be like this huge deal. I thought the planets were like completely gone, if I'm being totally honest, considering the things we've seen. That's kind of where my head was at. I was like, oh, they kind of destroyed the planets. I was like, oh, they destroyed them. We've seen it. So that wasn't the case. It was just like they kind of destroyed the civilization of the planets. So I'm excited to see if we do end up going to some of these other ones before we officially get to Attin again, how that's going to end up playing out. Like, are some of these other planets still okay? Like, did they kind of reform? Did they all, like I said, we don't really know if they had mints that were destroyed or if they never had them and Attin was always like the main one. And maybe each one had like its own specialty thing that it contributed, to the galaxy or, the Republic at the time. But who knows? At this point, it's only at Attin. And considering Attin's coordinates were destroyed at that point in time, which once again was over 100 years ago, even then, it was like, hey, let's make sure no one can follow us to this specific planet. The rest of these, I assume, were already destroyed. We don't know if the captain really did it or who it was. It was just, we know they were destroyed. So they were all kind of wiped out. And then you get to this planet and it's like, hey, let's go to Attin, destroy these coordinates. We now know where the mint is. And then, of course, all that fell down, and we'll get to that a little bit more as far as the details of that when we recap episode 5. But episode 4 was cool, having the planet where, of course, when they first get there, Wim is having his adventure mode on, and he's like, are you like a group of rebel kids fighting the adults to, take over the planet? I thought that was a really funny line. And then also, we had a lot of Neil, which was very cool. Neil even got a kiss at the end of the episode. He also fainted, which was really funny. But Neil got to have his moment for this episode where it was them going through and it's like this crazy battlefield and it's like, all right, we have kids fighting in wars. The dude is like, oh, this is my daughter. And he seems like he's an okay guy. Like he starts off menacing. Then it's like, you're warriors and we respect children around here. It was like, you train with us and, as long as you're worthy, I'll take you to like the Fallen Temple or whatever. No big deal. And then they get into battle and it's like, go out there. And it's like, huh? And it's like, go out there or we'll shoot you right now. And it was like, oh, this dude sucks. Like, that's harsh. But of course, his daughter was cool and she was like, hey, if you're going to force them to go, I'm going to go with them. It's like, all right, get out there. And fortunately, everything ended up working out because Jack, Nanawa, whatever the new name was that we got in the latest episode, him, he ends up paying off the other crew because he had all the Republic credits. So he ended up getting the animals back. I was like, hey, these are yours. And so they kind of worked everything out. He got the kids back. They got their information. They almost got destroyed by Smee because they went through and did the override for his memories, which I love how they did that. It was like, my captain made me forget. It's like, well, I'm the new captain, so let's do this. And it's like, oh, very, I don't know how many people have this connection, but as soon as it happened, I was like, oh, this is very Back to the Future, because it was like, hey, here's this crazy thing that no one else would really ask about. It's a very tough mystery that would come about. What happened on this planet? And it's like, okay, here's everything that happened. And then it was like, and then I was told, if anyone were to happen to come along and ask me some questions, they gotta go. Very Back to the Future Part 2. If you haven't seen it, definitely check that out. I highly recommend Back to the Future, of course. But love that moment. And then it was a very serious moment where it was like, tear them apart limb from limb, and the kids are all freaking out. Not much they can really do. It's a giant robot that, can just wipe everybody out, minus the peg leg. They could probably outrun them, but they were freaking out. So Neil has his moment. He throws the rocks to get the distraction going. He saves everybody. Of course, Ja comes in, hits the button on the back, just simple, he's powered down, and that's all it took. So save the day. Neil faints, everything's good. It's like, all right, let's go, let's figure out what in the world's going to happen, because we don't have the coordinates. It's the only planet that doesn't have coordinates. Let's figure out what in the world we're supposed to do next. And of course, that leads into episode 5. They wake up Smee. It's like, hey, don't kill us. No big deal. Of course, I love the fact that they go through the whole moment. They get their bit of information. They know what their next move is and what planet they have to go to next. And then it's like, all right, can you take us there? It's like, yes. It's like, all right. And then he just leans straight up and they're like, oh, he could have killed, he could have killed everybody if he wanted to anyway. He just snaps all the ropes and just gets up. And then he leads them to what was formerly a crazy pirate den, wiping people out, the mud pits where everybody would like sacrifice themselves, and battles of glory and just great pirate times. And then of course it turns into like the adult fun planet where no kids are allowed, and they have like crazy, the mud baths instead of like the mud pits, all these different things. And I was like, okay, it's the era of, over a century later, it's a time of peace, so to speak. And it's just like, hey, it's a neutral planet. As long as you're good, we're good. No weapons here, all this good stuff. And they just go down to the planet. And of course they do the classic kid situation, was like, all right, we'll have these kids pretend to be adults. They got away with it. I mean, it worked in Obi-Wan. I guess it can work here. This was more convincing. It was definitely, this was 100% more convincing. At least there were costumes versus just, here's a man with a very very wide, just lower half, because it's a human and a second human inside a jacket. Much better disguises for the Great Elders. So I like what they did there. They also had a scene before they landed on the planet with Wim, where he actually had a conversation where it's like, he's sad about everything that's going on. And I love how they had the reaction where it was like, oh, chin up and stuff. And he was going to leave. And it's like, you'll see him later. It's like, not my mom. And he stopped, but he sighed and he was just like, and it's like, I got to talk to the kid because his mom is dead. I'm like, okay. And he talks to him. And then, then of course he's like, just forget him, which is a very Jedi thing, even though he said it in his way of like, just forget everybody. And something I saw, because I didn't know this when I actually watched the episode, but people mentioned the line he says where I think it was like, your determination or your focus determines your future or something like that. That's actually a direct quote from Qui-Gon Jinn. So that has people like, just did he know Qui-Gon? Like, lots of different theories there. Personally, and I mentioned this as soon as it came up, I thought it was weird that people were like, oh, I think he's like probably just using tricks and stuff. I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's actually, I don't think he's a Jedi. Like, that's the thing. Everyone keeps sticking with that. I'm like, I think he's just a Force user. I'll personally, and I think I said this before, I'll personally be disappointed if it ends up being tricks. Like, it was magnets in his hand the whole time. I know people will once again reference Obi-Wan. Like, he did actually do that before. He did. But there's so many things in this episode. Like, they show it multiple times and it's just like, everything has to be like the exact same metallic element for him to do that. Like, it just seems interesting. Obviously you could explain it in Star Wars, but typically speaking, not every single piece of metal is just going to be like, this one magnet works on every form of metal. Like, there are different components. It might be like a small element here and there. A lot of electronic things, granted it's Star Wars, like there's so many metal casings for everything, but I'm just like, I think he just has the Force. It makes more sense versus everyone being like, I think he might be using strings and this and that. I'm like, I think he's just using the Force. I thought that the whole time. And I actually thought it was weird. Like, I know they were kind of teasing it, but I'm like, I think he's just using the Force. Like, he's not a Jedi. Maybe he trained with the Jedi for sure. But I think if he's not using the Force, it's going to blow my mind. Like, he has to just be using the Force and he's just a bad guy. And I don't know what we should expect. But depending on what happens in this next episode, because it was an amazing ending, especially with him getting a lightsaber, which was an Old Republic lightsaber, very cool, or High Republic, I should say. We'll see what happens, because he flicks the lightsaber on, and of course it ends. I was happy that we at least got to see what color it was from a hilarious scene with Wim where he turned it on and it's upside down. That was super funny. But I was like, all right, I thought that was going to be it. I didn't even expect him to actually pick it up. I was like, okay, at least I got to see what color it was, because that was the thing in my head. I was like, what if it was a red lightsaber? That would be kind of cool. So I was happy just to see what color it ended up being. But the fact that he picked it up and he turns it on at the end, I'm like, okay, if we get an action sequence and we see what he can do, if he's like spinning, I don't expect him to be like, flipping and flying, but if he has a specific like flow to him, it's like, okay, he trained with Jedi. At least he was a Padawan at some point in time. I don't know. I'm trying to remember how, well, I mean, if we went with Obi-Wan, I guess he'd be he'd be younger than Obi-Wan, of course, but same sort of situation. I mean, he'd be a bit younger than him. He would have been like a little kid when, Order 66 happened. I don't think they'll actually show it again. We'll see, I guess, but I don't think we'll get like another recreation of Order 66. I wouldn't mind it, but I just don't think they'll do it in this show, but they might. Who knows? Like, that'll be his, his kid version. We'll see him go through Order 66. It's definitely possible. I just don't know if we'll actually end up seeing that, but I'm like, if we get a good action sequence and we see him like spinning, I mean, in all honesty, all he has to do is reflect one blaster bolt and I'll be like, Jedi, he trained with Jedi. Like, you don't pull that off like instantaneously. Some people just have that skill for sure, but it's very rare. We've seen him use the Force, I'm assuming, depending on how he moves with the lightsaber. If, we actually see a fight come up in this next episode, we'll know. Like that'll, I think, will be like the clear sign. Like, once we see how he moves with the lightsaber, it'll be like, yeah, he was a Padawan, maybe for like half a second, Order 66 and whatnot, but he has his connection to the Force still. He still kind of trains with it here and there. He does like his little thing, because so far all he's done is just like pick stuff up, which I think is like the main thing. And he did stop, I can never remember her, Fern. He did stop her when she was like trying to like swing like the gold club at him or whatever, but I'm like, I don't think it's just magnets, or he used a magnet in his hand to repel it. I'm like, I don't think that's the case. I think he's just using the Force. So that's how I feel about that. But depending on what we get with this lightsaber, that might determine things. So I'm looking forward to that for sure. Of course, the kids are now just kind of in some mysterious area, which, no joke, when Wim did it, the first thing I thought was, that was stupid. He's done some stupid stuff. Obviously, that's why they're in space and everything. But I'm like, The last thing I would think was a good idea would be to open up the trap floor, because I would think as the final trap, it's yet another trap that will kill you. You have the spikes, which I thought was a great sequence, where the guy like throws the rock and then it like makes the rocks float up, and then he looks in and is like, oh, it's safe, and then they just shoot him and then his body floats up. I was like, they could have done it. I didn't expect it to happen, but they held for so long. I was like, are they gonna show blood like drip down? They didn't, of course, but I was like, they held it for so long that it made me think they would actually go there. But I was like, that would have been intense if they'd done it and just had like a little bit of blood drip down. That would have been really cool for like a Star Wars thing. But I thought that was a really great trap. Of course, they did like the laser thing, which was really funny, where all the kids were so short that it didn't cut them. I thought that was actually super funny. And then, excuse me, of course, the adult and the droid, they have to duck, but all the kids were just like freaked out and they're just like, whoa. And then a laser just shoots over their head. I was like, that was a good one, because they just didn't have that reaction time to even move. They were just like, huh. And then laser just clears them. Like, good timing, good time to be a kid. So I thought that was really cool. And of course they have the acid bath, and they solve the riddle of having to throw the money in, because that's the most important thing to a pirate. And then when they get inside, they of course find the data port, everything works out. And it's like, oh, so you have control of like this local area. Why don't you just go ahead and like fill up the acid pool again? Which I would assume means that they didn't kill Jaleel White, because I'm like, I mean, I know it's not like he has like the most important role in the show, but it's like, also that's Jaleel White. People know who Urkel is. We've seen the man. We know who Jaleel White is. For anyone who didn't know, that was Jaleel White, the guy with the laser eye. That was Urkel. For anyone that just didn't know that's who that was. So I would hope that they didn't just kill off like the randos, but he seemingly is like the third, possibly fourth in command, because he's he's Jaleel White, so they gave him a bunch of moments to shine. Well, I shouldn't say a bunch, because we've barely seen the pirates, but he's had the most. He's had more than the wolf guy. When you really think about it, he's had more moments. But I would hope that they didn't kill him off at random, and it was like some of the other people that got killed off. So we'll see what happens. But I'm like, I would assume he would have been one of the first people down. He was the guy who was, leading everyone down there. He would have been in that pool. But they could easily say like they sent someone down and he was talking to the wolf guy or whatever. And so he wasn't in the pool when it filled back up and everybody, melted and screamed. And it was like, huh. They didn't show blood, but we heard a bunch of people screaming and melting in a pool of acid. So that was interesting. And then of course, right after, it's like, okay, they find out about the mint, and it's like, remember what you said. And he stands there and they have the music playing, and he's just standing and he's thinking, and it's like, and he turns around and then he challenges for, the right to be captain. And of course he wins, but it was definitely an intense moment. Aside from, the funny lightsaber bit, it was definitely an intense moment. It's like, all you have to do is say that you yield. And she tried. She really did. She didn't want to do it, but it's like, clearly he didn't want to kill her. They'll get to the end, things will work out, or he'll die. That would be interesting if they actually killed him by the end of the series. But things will happen as they happen. They'll solve all this. But for now, he's definitely in the bad guy camp, and it's very cool to see. And then, of course, once he ends up winning, it's like, all right, well, captain's orders, take this Latish prisoner. And then, like I said, Wim does what I would consider an absolutely horrible thing, where he decides, I know what to do. And he hits the little stool and it just pops the trap door open. I'm like, the first thing on my mind was like, well, there's going to be spikes. You're dead. You killed everybody. Like, that's the first thought I would have had, because it's the final trap. Obviously, they'll get out. There's 4 of them. They will find their way out. It's, the story. But realistically speaking, it wouldn't make any sense for that not to lead to them instantly dying. It's the literal final trap. Every other trap is a death trap. A pool of acid was the death trap. It would be interesting if, this was the thing where it was like, you failed, but you get to try again, I guess. But somehow they will live. That's what's going to happen. But I was definitely like, That's one of those, just those little things. I'll get over it. The series is so good. It'll be like, whatever. But it's definitely one of those things you can nitpick, where you're like, every other trap was like the most deadly thing in the world, but the final trap is just going to lead them to like just a little cavern that they're somehow going to escape. I'm sure there will be something, I would hope there would be something there where maybe it's just like the final trap is just a pit. And then there's like, normally people just kind of starve to death and they just die. So they'll kind of slide into a bunch of bones or whatever. And then somehow they'll find their way out with the 4 of them. But other than that, I'm like, it can't lead to just a path where it's like, oh, we're out of here now. It's like, it has to be something where that was their escape for the moment, but then they end up trapped in something else. It almost has to just be like a random pit where it's like, you don't instantly die, you suffer. You came this close to the treasure and then you just suffer thinking about that. That's like the worst torture for like a final trap. I'm not going to kill you instantly. I'll just make you starve to death as you were like literally this close to like the ultimate treasure. And then I just dropped you in the pit and let you starve to death. Like that's the worst final trap. So that's my guess, is that they're going to somehow end up in a pit, which somehow they'll, find their way out of course. But I'm excited for this next one. I don't know what they're going to do with this lightsaber. Once again, that has me very excited. Like, how far are we going to go? We saw a bunch of people get shot up. They're not going to go like, they're not going to do like classic Clone Wars. Like when that used to be on Cartoon Network, they were like chopping people's heads off and stuff. I don't think they're going to go that far, but he's got to cut somebody up. Like he doesn't care. I would love to see it. I think it's one of the elements where it's like, they could get dark. They aren't going to have them cut up like 5 different people and be like slicing limbs all over the place. They could. I would love it, but this is for kids, so they won't do that. But he's got to kill somebody. He's got a lightsaber. He's going to kill some. He killed a bunch of people in a pool of acid. He's not afraid to do it up close. He's going to kill somebody in this next. He has to. He's got to kill somebody with his lightsaber at some point. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they kind of play around with that element, how many people they get away with, like dismembering, but we'll see what ends up happening. I don't know if we should expect to see the parents again in the next episode. Like we got like a little glimpse of them, not even in episode 5, but that was actually episode 4, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, no, it was episode 5. So they're, trying to break through and figure things out. Fern's mom is like, hey, I'm trying to do this through the proper authorities. Who knows what that means? In all honesty, with the way this planet is the person at the top, is the supervisor even a human? I genuinely wonder about that now. They aren't even allowed to leave the planet. How much do they truly understand? Like, do they know everything? They know they're not supposed to leave, but is it like, do they know the history? Do they know anything going on outside of the galaxy? Like, is it only where the adults know what's actually happening? Do they not even know? I'm very curious. Like, do they lie to the kids, or is everyone being lied to by whoever this supervisor is? So I'm very curious how that ends up playing out. Also, it is Star Wars. Some creatures live a long time. There were a couple of people that crashed when that ship crashed, but we don't know if everyone died. We know the captain was killed by his concubine. Another funny moment, like, what's a concubine? Well, story time's over. That was a great sequence. But who knows what species the concubine was? Who knows what species some of the other characters were that were on this planet, and how things kind of unfolded as you have like this person who just kind of pops up out of nowhere and then is like, hey, these people are living a very comfy life. It tends to be kind of an easy story. Like, these people have no idea what danger is. I can figure this out and I can make my way to the top. We don't know if that happened yet. It's been over 100 years. Once again, it's Star Wars. Lots of species live for lots of different time spans. It could still be someone from that ship that ended up taking over this planet and becoming the supervisor. They could all actually be, be dead 100%. And then that was it. They all died and poof, treasure planet. But we don't know. Still a mystery there. So I'm definitely excited to see what we end up getting going forward for Attin, what's going to happen with the kids, what's going to happen with the other pirates coming in. So there's still a lot to look forward to. Not sure how many episodes we actually have for the show, but either way, I'm excited for whatever we end up getting next. But of course, I would love to know what you guys thought about episodes 4 and 5. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, your least favorite parts about it. Would love to know your thoughts on the ending turn and, him going into like full pirate mode and challenging to become captain, and of course him getting the lightsaber at the end. I would love to know what you guys think is going to happen with that, because I think we're getting the sequence. Something's going to happen. We're going to get something good. The whole show's been good. I don't think they're going to disappoint with the guy who is willing to kill people getting a lightsaber. They aren't going to go as dark as I kind of wish we could get in Star Wars. They just haven't done that yet. It's stuff you got to read like in the comics, but I'm waiting for the day where they're just like, all right, here's like a mature Star Wars thing. Because there's so much stuff in Star Wars where it's like, even for like the kid things, Darth Maul getting cut in half, that's pretty intense. They could go darker. I don't know when we'll ever get that from like an official Star Wars thing, especially now that it's Disney. But man, I would love to see it. I want to see them get like real dark with some stuff. Might not happen too much, but hey, we'll just have to wait and see. Either way, I'm sure the show will be good regardless of how dark they go. I think the show's going to be great. But like I said, want to know your thoughts on these 2 episodes and what we're going to get going forward. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.